Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business program presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Listen weekday mornings to Ken and Matt on the WGAN Morning News. Eggs and Issues is supported by presenting sponsors Bank of America, Martins Point Healthcare, and Unum, in cooperation with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, First Light Fiber, and WEX. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber of Commerce President Jack Lufkin.
I have to get used to this. If you've gone to our normal Eggs and Issues, this is opposite day because we're usually over there, and so I'm a little off my kilter here. So thank you for sticking with this event. Obviously, the food scene in Portland and in the greater Portland area is amazing, and we're going to have just an amazing presentation here today. This was, I think, a record, twice canceled by giant snowstorms. So thank you for coming to this sort of mashup between Kegs and Issues and Eggs and Issues, so we're calling Kegs and Eggs. I am Jack Lufkin. I'm with KeyBank, and I'm the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. And I do have just a couple of quick updates to give to folks before we get into the presentation. First and foremost, just to make everybody aware, the City of Portland is looking at an ordinance around paid sick time. I don't know anybody who doesn't agree with the sentiment of this ordinance. The details, however, we've heard from lots of businesses, can be quite problematic. It basically creates a mandatory up to 6 days of paid sick leave for all employees, including part-time and seasonal. There is a Health and Human Services Committee meeting that's happening on Tuesday of next week at 5:30 at City Hall. Go and make your voice be heard, whether you're for it or against it. But again, you'll want to read the ordinance because many of the details in the ordinance, even if you have a sick time policy, it could be potentially superseded by this ordinance as written. Okay, so on to the next event that's happening also on April 24th, which is next Tuesday. This is being hosted by our friends at People's United Bank, and it's going to be held at the Rising Tide Brewing Company. And they're going to be talking about succession planning. Hear perspectives of 4 successful companies on how to identify and develop potential successors for key leadership positions. And we do ask that you register in advance for that one. Also happening next week is a small business seminar series called Understanding the Needs of Millennials in Today's Work Environment. Within this seminar, consultants from KMA Human Resources Consulting will be providing an eye-opening session on effective strategies attracting and retaining millennials. And then lastly, our next Eggs and Issues will be on May 8th. This is going to feature the Jobs for Maine Graduates President and CEO, Craig Larrabee, where he will share JMG's unique connections to education, employers, and community leaders that are essential in creating a pipeline of talent for Maine's skilled workforce. Moving on, I would like to take just a minute to thank our generous sponsors who make these kinds of productions possible. Our presenting sponsors are Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare. Our cooperating sponsors are Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, WEX, and First Light. Our reception sponsor are Veraldana, Clark Insurance, and KeyBank. Our parking sponsor is Sevee Maher Engineers, and Headlight Audio Visual provides us with our overall production support. The Forecaster is our print sponsor, Maine Biz is our e-media partner, WGAN is our radio sponsor, and WMTW-TV serves as our broadcast partner. We'd also like to thank our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare, the University of Southern Maine, and Southern Maine Community College. AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing provides support for our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs program, which allows area high school and college students to attend Exit Issues. Typically, the room has some of these high school students because they come before school. I'm not sure if any of them are here today, but typically we would have students from Cheverus, Portland Public Schools, Southern Maine Community College, USM, and I know there's at least one Thornton student in the room as well, my son. So if you are here, please stand in so we can recognize you. Thanks. SMCC. You're representing the whole of you. The Portland Public Library, I just love this new sponsorship that we created. Portland Public Library is our FMI, for more information, sponsor. They provide information after this event, which you will receive in an email later this week. Baker Newman & Noyes sponsors our Community Corner program, which allows area nonprofit members to promote their organizations at Eggs and Issues. This month's Community Corner is very appropriately for this topic, the Locker Project. Maine has the highest child hunger rate in New England. The Locker Project, established by Katie Wallace, partners with the Good Shepherd Food Bank to offer free, nourishing, and nutritional food for Maine children who experience food insecurity. The Locker Project directly works with schools to create a unique program which allows students to access take-home foods and healthy class-time snacks. The Locker Project has worked with many schools across the region, including East End Community School, Hall, Presumpscot, and Reiki schools here in Portland, the Kaler Elementary School, Lyman Moore Middle School, Deering High School, and the Bayside Learning Community. Members of the Locker Room, I would invite you to please stand and be recognized for your fantastic work. Now, on to the topic that has brought you out here today. Reminder, we will have a question and answer session after the we are going to have a panel here, and it's going to be moderated, but there will be time at the end for questions. I would ask folks, there are 2 microphones in the room. If you would come up to the microphone, state your name and organization that you're with, and pose your question. So that'll happen at the conclusion of the panel discussion. So what we're going to talk about here today is they're going to talk about the challenges of becoming a food destination. And for my opinion, Portland and the Portland region has certainly become that. So what I'd like to do is introduce the panelists and our moderator to come to the stage. So we have Josh Berry from Union Restaurant, Steve DiMillo from DiMillo's on the Water, David Turin from David's Restaurant, and our moderator is the president and CEO of the Maine Restaurant Association, Steve Hewins. Thank you, Steve. Thank you all. Good to see you.
Have a seat, gentlemen. So, thank you. I was going to say good morning. I almost blundered because so I've been to many Eggs and Issues, as we all have. And so this is I feel pleased that we are here for the first Kegs and Eggs. Kegs and Eggs? No, Eggs and Kegs? I don't even know. Kegs and Issues. We could call it all those things. Restaurants are a big part of Portland, as we all know. You know, sometimes the public, and maybe many of you in the room, to some degree might even not really understand the intricacies of operating restaurants and the challenges that we face. But we take great pride as a community to have this kind of food culture in Portland, and a very successful one. These guys are well acquainted with the industry and can speak to a lot of topics, but I wanted to start by giving you just a little bit of a framework of overview of some numbers to give you a sense of what the industry means for Portland and for the state of Maine. First of all, the Portland ESA, the Economic Summary Area of Portland, is Portland, Westbrook, South Portland, and the islands. And within that area, there are 622 licensed food providers, which is a lot of competition, obviously, in that small area. And in 2017, that represented $541 million in restaurant sales, which is, compared to the state of Maine, which is $2.8 billion, that's roughly 20% of the state's restaurant businesses here in the Portland ESA. It grew 4% last year, as did the state, by the way. Interestingly, the Portland and state grew at the same 4% rate, which is pretty strong for an economy here in Maine, and especially for the restaurant industry. Traditionally, it might not be that great, so we're still growing dramatically. It's tied pretty closely to the lodging industry. You know, I run the Maine Restaurant Association, but also the Maine Innkeepers Association, hotels, basically, and they are aligned. It's more symbiotic than it's ever been, especially in this town. As you know, there's a lot of hotels that are growing, and I'm going to ask these guys to maybe comment a little bit on the makeup of their business and how much that is impacting the growth of the industry. But the lodging industry broke $1 billion in sales in Maine for the first time in its history, and it was up 7%. So The industry itself, interestingly enough, hospitality, which is the sector we're talking about, 106,000 Maine people are employed in that industry. That's 16% of the workforce. The second biggest private sector employer in the state behind healthcare. So it's very impactful. But as I say, we're still very successful and growing, and we're on the top 10 list in a lot of places. We're best of for still showing up on those reports. I do have a video I think is queued up that I want to show you to give you a sense of sort of what this industry about is Maine hospitality and what that really means, restaurants and hotels in the state. So can we show that video now? Just a short 2-minute video, give you an idea. So thank you. That was a good video. Yeah, thank you. That was to show the people that are involved in this industry, because we talk about the food and the culture, but it really is about the people. It's about Maine hospitality, and you saw at the end those two logos merging, because we're in the process of merging right now. So in about probably 2 months from now, we'll become Hospitality Maine, a different organization, combining the two associations together into a more powerful entity. So anyhow, that's the framework I want to give you. Now I want to introduce our panelist. As you saw, Josh Berry right here from the left from the Union Restaurant at the Press Hotel. Steve DiMillo, yes, thank you. Steve DiMillo from DiMillo's Restaurant, and Chef David Turin from David's Restaurants. They have a lot of background in this industry, going to provide some good perspective. So let me just start by asking you guys, start with Josh, how did you get into the business here in Portland? What's your path?
You only have 37
yeah,
minutes. So
we just want to give you, everybody's got it.
Yeah.
But just give us the headlines.
I was born and raised in Maine, in Bridgeton, Casco, Naples area. I went to school at the Balsams Grand Resort in New Hampshire. And then I spent a year in Switzerland, and I worked in Europe for a while. The goal was to always come back to Maine. So it was trying to always get back here, and a good friend of mine, Michael Strajek, who's the general manager of the Press Hotel, called me. I was in Stowe, Vermont then, and he's like, I'm opening this hotel in Portland, and I'm like, I'm in immediately, and now I'm sitting here with you guys. So yeah, it was an easy one.
Great. And I should say Josh was last year's Maine Chef of the Year for the Maine Restaurant Association last year. So many people know Steve's Restaurant's been here on the waterfront for many years, but maybe you can give a little background.
Yeah, my position started, I guess, in my mother's womb in 1960. But I'm happy to be working with many family members. 3 generations of my family run DiMillo's on the water. I started when I was 8 years old, washing pots and pans, and worked my way up into the front of the house when I was a youngster. And here I am 40 plus years later. And I love it. It's great. I mean, to know this many people in this room because of my family's restaurant is just an awesome thing. And to know these 2 dudes.
David.
Well, so I'm from Ohio, and I always thought Maine was way, way, way far away, but I had family here. So I had opened restaurants starting in 1983 in Massachusetts, and in 1992, family dragged me to Maine against my will, and I've thanked them ever since. So it's worked out pretty well. So I have to say, the one thing, I don't know why, maybe someone in this room can answer why we still have a traffic report on the radio. I don't even know. I lived in New York and Boston. I can never figure that out. So it really is, it's a great place to live, and it's a tremendous place to have a business, especially a restaurant.
Yeah. Well, David, let me just start with you first. A question, continue with you. How did Portland get this food reputation, this food culture? What are we doing that put us in the map this way?
Well, I'm going to say I think that it was a confluence of a lot of opportunities that made it very easy for chef operators like me who didn't have a ton of money to get into business for themselves. So if you look at any big city, just the cost would be prohibitive for most people that just wanted to be like a mom and pop shop as I started out. And then the other part is the availability that we have of unbelievable seafood and produce and meats all, I mean, literally I could walk out of my restaurant and I can walk to the fish market and get stuff that people are begging for all across the country and across the world. So, makes it easy and affordable. And I understand that there's a lot of concerns that maybe Maine's an expensive place to do business, and it is in a lot of ways, but in terms of occupancy cost just for your building and whatnot, it's not compared to big cities. So there's just a lot of good reasons why it's a great place, and you can see that growth has just continued on, and it looks like there's no sign of that slowing in the future.
Right. And do you see the same thing, Steve? I mean, you have different background on this.
Sure, and before we go any further, I would want to mention that we're missing one of our panelists.
Oh, geez, thank you
Michelle
for that.
Corry from 555. So she and her husband, Steve Corry, also another Maine Restaurant Association Chef of the Year, built several businesses, several restaurants in Portland that have done very well. Her involvement in our association, Tina Hewitt-Gordon from the Nonantum, Judy Forsley from Sea Dog, all board members, Michelle's our chair right now, but unfortunately she had a vacation plan with her kids, so she couldn't be here. But anyways, that involvement in our association has been great, and I guess I'm an old guy, so I can make the difference between the guys and the girls. The women have, kind of softened this old white guy board of ours, and have really taken us to new levels. But go back to, I think the competition is what's made Portland the foodie town that it is. So when I go somewhere else, if I go to a different city, I'm really not wowed anymore. I'm wowed at every corner of Portland. Go anywhere I want, there's a different cuisine to offer, and a different venue. So these, and to talk about the chefs being involved, their personalities. They've got open kitchens. They're greeting you. It's warm. It's not trendy, but it's current. So competition, I think, is what's good for us.
Do you see that as well? The trends?
Yeah. So it's funny because we were talking about this beforehand. Competition, I find, is incredibly healthy, but collaboration, for me, is super more important for Portland chefs and restaurants. I know that I've met a lot of you here in the audience and a lot of people through the Press Hotel, and we donate a lot, and we are always, community outreach. It's a huge portion for us, and it's very important for Union and for the Press Hotel. And it's funny is that when you start doing that, you see other chefs and we're always either working with the hospital or working with the Locker Project, which is a great organization, you know, and we're always doing that, and involving the chefs into your community more and more and more is something that I see that Portland does, and not so much of the other feeder cities that are around Portland. And I think that's what really drives our community more, is the community outreach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't that the thing about restaurants in general, is that they are part of the social fabric of a place. You know, we all got to eat, so we always have that in common. But beyond that, restaurants create a vitality to a community, and you know, and sometimes that gets lost on everybody. And the stuff that you guys give back, all of you do that, I know that, is sometimes lost, and especially around food issues in the state, which are really important to kids and others that aren't, you know, secure with the food. These guys and others are really involved in giving that back. And so it sort of leads me into another question about how much is the food part of the quality of life to you guys? Do you see that as a element of why people want to be in Maine and things like that? We talk quality of life, sometimes think mountains and oceans, but is it part of this?
Oh, I'd say I think there's two things that make Portland and Maine so continuing to be at the top of those top 10 lists, and one is there's still authentic hospitality going on in Maine, and that's not very trendy. I mean, how many restaurants have you gone to in a big city, and you talk to a server or a host of it, and they kind of look at you and they're like, well, thank you, you know. It's like, okay, no, so we're pretty authentic, and then the dearth of incredible stuff that we have to eat, it's just amazing, and it's accessible. So,
is farm to table still a real thing? I mean, is that the price of admission in Portland?
I'd have to say, farm to table was here before people
thing.
started talking about it. I mean, we've served local fresh seafood and baked goods and all the ingredients that we can source locally for forever. And now we talk about it.
Yeah. So. Do you think so?
I think it's important. I think people they want to know what they're eating. You know what I mean? And they feel an importance to, you know, the community of where they're getting their food. And sourcing local. I mean, we have some of the best foods, like you said, some of our farmers markets, and just walking through the farmers markets and seeing how people shop and seeing what they eat and talking to them, you get so much more interaction, and it's incredible seeing that.
Yeah.
I always run into Josh on Wednesdays at the farmers market out in Market Square. You know, so fun.
Yeah, and there's a cost to that too. I mean, there's, you know, obviously we want to support local farms and local fishermen and seafood operators. But then again, there comes a cost to that, and as it gets to the point where, you know, you got to be able to sell it at a price on a menu that people will be able to pay for, and that sort of thing. Is that coming more of an issue, or no?
Well, I think, you know, we're sort of at this place where, you know, frankly, I think restaurant prices probably need to go up higher than where they are, and there's enough restaurants that kind of keeps the pricing a little lower than probably where it needs to be to support, you know, a number of things. I mean, you know, one of the issues we're probably going to talk about here is staffing and what that means. And I think one of the biggest challenges for our industry being I mean, we're an enormous employer in the state of Maine. And I think you gave a statistic earlier, the dollars that are involved. So we're the number 2 in dollars, but we're the number 1 in employee count because, you know, healthcare workers make more money. So it's really important that we continue as an industry to make it a fact that having a food service or a hospitality industry job is a worthwhile job.
Right.
And that, you know, prices need to go up a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that, again, with caring what you eat and knowing what you're consuming, but trying to stay affordable for guests to come in, it's a balancing act, you know, and it's always a balancing act. And the long line of people from soil to mouth, and everybody needs a piece of that change, you know, to get into there. And I think, you know, being chefs and being creative and you know,
finding
alternatively
new
using
products,
things,
new species, things like
you know. But but Maine, we have so much. We have so much to give.
Yeah.
And I have to add too, Portland's the economic engine of the region, if not the state. So we're fortunate that most of the high earners live in this area, and let's face it, restaurant dining, and it's almost like theater. It's entertainment. People are going out way more times than they used to. I mean, look at my kids. I mean, they dine out more than they dine in, I think.
It does, too.
And that's all good, good for our industry.
Yeah. What's your mix of business between locals and visitors? You know, we talk about Portland as a destination. You know, there's a seasonality aspect, I'm sure, but do you guys have a sense of how much is local customers and how much is Steve? Start with Dave.
I mean, I probably have a very different view than Steve. We have pretty different restaurants. I think I would answer that question in a different way than what the percentage is. What I will say is that having owned restaurants in Portland since 1992, it used to be that you could survive pretty easily if your restaurant was sort of, you did a half a seating or a full seating, on Sunday through Thursday nights, and then you'd do 2 turns on the weekends, and you could make it at that. We can't do that anymore, and there's enough restaurants now where there's not enough local people to support the restaurants we have. So without the hotels and without the tourism and the visitors, and I say visitors in addition to tourism very purposefully, because tourists are not always visitors, they're different things. We can't survive, I think, growing the way we are with just local people. Right. So, what the percentage is, I'd say it definitely varies from season to season.
Yeah. I engage guests as much as I possibly can, and we're fortunate also being here in Southern Maine that Massachusetts is 2 hours away. So we generate a lot of customers that come up to Portland. Our friends that visit Portland invite them to come up. They showcase us. They come up and visit our restaurants. So that population is helpful too.
Yeah.
Being the only one on the panel that has a restaurant that's inside a hotel, that creates a different type of benefit or challenge. We have guests all over the world come to the Press Hotel, and so our exposure to that is we have to balance how many seats we have in our restaurant for hotel guests, but also for all of you guys who I've seen most of you in the restaurant. And luckily enough, we're not considered a hotel restaurant, and we have a great local following. And so if we can continue that, that's going to just be great. But everybody wants to eat in Portland restaurants.
Yeah, that's right.
And from all over the country, they want to come to eat at Portland restaurants, so that's really good.
Right, and that is the challenge, because as I think it was David said at the beginning, the growth potential for Portland continues in terms of visitors, not necessarily tourists, people from away coming here. The population's roughly stagnant. We know that. We're the oldest state in the nation. We've heard that many times. We're trying to draw younger people here and have a hard time because the jobs in other industries aren't here. And then we have our own workforce issues in the hospitality industry where there aren't enough people to provide the hospitality, Maine hospitality that we're showing. So you got all these factors potentially inhibiting growth. So if you start looking at some of the things that are the challenges side of things, what bubbles to the top of your list in terms of trying to do business successfully in Portland?
So I know that some of the challenges we have, and just being a restaurant operator, I can say that March was horrible with snowstorms, and that really puts a damper on us, especially being such a weather-dependent state. I mean, we're not in a subtropical climate, and that does put a damper on things, but also fluctuating prices of our lobster industry. That really, people are coming to Maine for lobster, and we have to figure out how to get it on our menu at an attractive price point. But also staffing is going to be a concern. And all that.
Echo what Josh said about the pricing of fresh seafood. If you want to serve fresh seafood, the price is not stagnant. We've just experienced the highest lobster prices ever in the history of the lobster industry in Maine. The boat price last week was $13 a pound. I don't know what it was today. It's never been. Boat price, that's boat run, it's $13 a pound. It was $10.50, I think, last winter, and that was enough to deal with, we thought, and then this winter's even worse. So big challenge. The bottom line, I said that this is like theater, or the restaurants are like theater, and it's entertainment, and everybody likes it, and we're supposed to make you feel at home, and we do, but we're also in the back office crunching numbers and trying to make it work, because most restaurants are working on a 4 to 8% bottom line before taxes, and boy, 8%, man, I can't remember the last time we did 8%. It's very challenging. So you people that are in other industries, you know, you have your own numbers to crunch, but we really work on tight margins, and the weather and fresh seafood costs are a big challenge for us.
Well, yeah, we lose a Saturday night in February or March. You don't get to open those tables up on Tuesday or the next day and fill them up and make it up, so it's gone. I would say, I think our biggest challenge is a city, honestly, looking in the bigger thing. I mean, certainly prices is an issue, are an issue. I think affordable housing and quality of life issues for the staff who are going to run our restaurants and hotels is the biggest issue challenging us. And I've seen this happen when I had restaurants in Massachusetts, in Newburyport. I remember we got to a point where the housing got to be so expensive, we couldn't employ anybody that lived any less than an hour away. And that's, you know, we're reading it happening in big cities around the country. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that'll be a challenge that we have to face.
Well, I think the answer is more housing. You're right, because that is a big issue. And, you know, you can't blame the market. You know, people want to live here that have a lot of means, and they buy expensive condominiums, and developers are, you know, satisfying that need. But we have an entire workforce that can be shut out of Portland because they just can't even live here, and they got to drive in 30 minutes from somewhere, and they got to park. The issues exist in the resort areas around the state too. Places like Ogunquit, Kennebunk have very similar situations relative to housing. So yeah, that's a big factor.
Well, it's a balancing act, and I just look at, we have such a attractive product that people want to come and enjoy, and honestly, as the world is in progressively more turmoil, places like Maine specifically, we look all the more appealing to visitors and to travelers, which is, it's a tragedy that that's one of the reasons. But it would be a pity if those housing and transportation issues and whatnot were the thing that kind of put the brakes on the economy.
Right, and I don't think you guys use a lot of the foreign temporary workers in your businesses, which are widely used through the state of Maine. Those are H-2B workers, you probably heard about them. They're foreign temporary workers. They're not immigrants. They're not coming here to live here. They're coming here to work for seasons. And, you know, they get tied up in Washington in the immigration argument, unrightfully, not the way it should be, but they are. So that's a big problem in the state, because not having those workers also causes potentially poaching from different restaurants, other workers, because there's so few of them around. So it's a real difficult scenario, this workforce piece, which I don't think we need to go too much deeper into. But I would say that education, we got to create more hospitality workers through the community college system. The USM has a new hospitality and tourism program. So we got to bring them up that way. I spoke at the prison in South Wyndham the other day, because we're looking at nonviolent offenders that are leaving to become, we're training them in Serve Safe and some of the culinary programs so they can come out and get a gainful job, because we can hire them right away. I will say about immigrants too, it's another factor. Many of them are not able to speak English well enough to work in the industry, but we would take all those people, I think, on in various roles in hospitality. And then you got recently retired people that maybe did work in this industry. Many of us started in the restaurant business. I bet in this room, maybe 25 or 30% worked in restaurants at one point. It's very prevalent throughout the rest of the economy. So we'll move off the workforce point, but that's going to be a big factor to sustain growth in the future of the industry in Maine. What about doing business in the city of Portland? Are there issues that you face in terms of Portland itself? I don't want to get too political here, but you know, just generally speaking. Yeah.
No, being right across from City Hall and One City Center, I'm going to keep my mouth shut a little bit. But we have a lot of people come to our restaurant, you know, and it's a good meeting, as all restaurants are, meeting places, and it's you know a place to unite and kind of leave work out of it and just enjoy yourselves. But I think all restaurants, and especially Portland, you can go into any restaurant and it's just like a small movie scene of extras. We all see each other all the time in this place, so it's pretty good.
1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Is that a pass, Steve?
No, actually that was an excellent response. You know, because you know, if you're in the restaurant business, you're serving Democrats, Republicans, everybody else, and all in between. So I get the point. It's a good one.
I got PR agents over there that are like, cut it. Yeah.
I mean, the government, city government and state government, federal government, they're constantly throwing up a roadblock for you. something new that you have to deal with in your business. We've got one coming up here, the paid time off initiative and ordinance in Portland. It's going to be a problem for a lot of us in our industry. Some have already mastered this. My friend David here already has mastered it, but he's already implemented it. But it's a challenge, and it kind of takes the fun out of it. We like to think of ourselves as we're in the kitchen preparing food. We've got beverages for people. We've got a nice dining room, and the government takes the fun out of it, because I'm in the office and I'm on the phone and I'm in Washington, I'm in Augusta, and spending time with people that I like, but I'd rather not be with you.
Yeah. Well, for drinks maybe.
I would say, there's always new regulations and things like that, but I will just give a shout out to the city of Portland that I think has really streamlined their business licensing office in the last couple of years, and it's gotten amazingly efficient. So, kudos to them.
Okay, so let's move off the challenges on that point. Just kind of crystal ball out to the future now, and then we'll take some questions from out in the audience. Hope you guys have some. But is Portland still on the leading edge? I mean, are we still in the place where we're sort of out in front of our competitive destinations? You see that?
I think so. I mean, you can look at, we had more James Beard nominations in the city than for the past 5 years. So from a culinary standpoint, definitely. Yep. The last 4 cooks I've hired have come from out of state wanting to come to Union to be a chef. So it's attracting people to come here for that destination specifically. But there's more restaurants opening every day.
Yeah, there are.
So yeah, it's gonna
and
be busy.
hotels too,
And
amazingly.
hotels, yeah.
Yeah, do you see that?
I think it's amazing. I don't think we got anywhere near the end, and it seems to me that you mentioned those top 10 lists. We used to be at 10. Now we're at like 4.
Yeah.
3.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still on the upswing.
It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
It blows my mind.
And you look around, I mean, we talk about food all night, but you look around for the, at all the attractions, amenities, and beautiful places to visit. You've got the islands, you've got, you got the mountains that are close by, museums and shopping. And
music.
Man, there's a lot of reasons to come to Portland, and these new increased hotel rooms are nothing but positive for us in our business.
Yeah, right. And we have beer too, speaking of which.
We do have beer.
Half of our, whatever we call today's event, the keg part. Do you see, I mean, people do come here for, I think, beer too as well. And do you find in your restaurants now you try to feature more local beers and that sort of thing?
When we first opened, we have 6 taps in Union and 2 taps in Inkwell, and we made a conscious decision to not put any only use local beers on there, and we've only had a couple people that were wanted, a Coors Light or something like that, right. But everybody is really standing behind all the, there's so much diverse different breweries out there, so it makes it easy to have some great beers.
Good.
Yeah. I met some folks last night. I try to engage as many people as I can in my workday. And these people were, middle-aged people from New York, and they were here because of the Zimmerman list. If you didn't catch that recently, he focused on a few of our restaurants here in the area. There was Duck Fat and was 4th Street? 4th Street wasn't on. They went to Five Islands Lobster. But these folks, they were almost sheepishly said when I asked them, we always want to know how they got to DiMillo's, and I find out for marketing reasons. And they said, believe it or not, we're here to eat. And we saw this, they're foodie people, and they had a great time. They had a wonderful meal. We fit into the dining category kind of differently than my friends here. We serve a locally sourced fresh seafood, simply prepared. We serve a lot of people. It's hard to be focusing on each plate. Like my wife and I like to go to 555 once in a while, and we sit on the balcony and we watch them prepare their meals, and we call them the food artists. And they'll place a couple of scallops, turn the plate, stand back and look at it. Doesn't happen in my kitchen. try to gather the scallops to the nice way, but it's hard to do when you serve as many people as we do. But it's the diversity of the restaurants in Portland. I mean, really, where else do you go? I don't travel a lot, but DC, Boston, Chicago, we've been. It leaves me wondering, really, now we got Brunswick.
I joke with out-of-state visitors, and they always kind of nod and say it's true. They come and I say, "Oh, you're here from New York. It's great." It's like we threw in the hotel for free, and they're like, "What do you mean?" "Oh, well, our restaurants are so much cheaper than New York restaurants. You practically get your hotel for free on the trip." And they're like, "Yeah, it's true." So
Yeah, it's true.
And the beer thing is going crazy. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Tying it to another reason another anchor for bringing people here, and they want to eat obviously after spending time at the breweries and stuff. So projecting out now 10, 15 years, what do you see as trends that keep this? I mean, obviously, one thing is you can see we've got creative people. These are representative of the creativity that exists in Portland. So people are always retooling, remodeling, reshaping, whether it be a business model or food prep or things like that. What do you guys see as trending going forward, do you think, for Portland? I don't want to, it's kind of a big question.
Yeah.
You're probably just looking out for what's going on this season.
Summer's coming right now.
Yeah, right.
But
well, the seasonality
I'd say
is a question.
one thing that we try to always foster, and besides food or anything, is our team and our staff. We have to put everything into them. Less turnover, and whatever we can do to increase our team and our heroes, what we call them, because we got some great guys. And that no matter what, even 10, 15, 20 years from now, and however many restaurants there are going to be, we have to just focus on that. They're going to be our leaders going forward. Someone else is going to be sitting here from Union Restaurant, not me. So we got to really make them the best they can be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you see anything? Well, I mean, you've got, like you said, the traditional place, Steve. Obviously,
I think there's always going to be a place for that.
Right.
Where are we that many years? It may be a more scaled down operation. One, because of staffing. And another might be that we have brought our chef Melissa Bouchard, and her kitchen staff have brought the level of food up at DiMillo, so up many notches. So we kind of like having better quality, less quantity. Serve less people, do a better job. But we got people like this you got to keep up with. So they are driving the market. And that's what happens. Probably happens in every industry, but in the restaurant business, keeping up with the Joneses or the Turins. Varies.
Well, Steve, there will always be a place for that food, and it'll be named DiMillo's. So I think looking out 5, 10 years, I think one of the big trends will be that there will be many more plant-based cuisines that will be getting a lot more play. And I think that we'll see ethnic cuisines that we've never even really, from countries we probably couldn't find on a map, and we'll find out that their grandmothers had amazing food too, and that'll get mixed through. And we don't really have an indigenous food in America, particularly like so many countries do, and we've kind of adopted a lot of these cuisines. And I think people like Josh, people like me, we spend a lot of effort trying to figure out how to take something that somebody made 100 years ago, and what are we going to do with it? How are we going to turn that on its ear? But I think plant-based food will be a really big thing in 10 years.
I still love baked beans and red hot dogs.
There you go. Yeah, but you're going to make the best red hot dog that anybody's ever eaten.
But that is actually a pretty good point, because we've got in this state a lot of the small farms. We don't have the big industrial Cargill type farms like we do in the Midwest. Our farms are very small and can be younger people that are really getting scientific about what they're growing, and maybe unique plant-based foods that we can feature in restaurants around here. It'd be nice.
I don't know that we're going to get to the insect thing, though. That's a thing, I've read about insects. This as a trend. I'm like, I don't know.
I won't be.
Having a hard time with that one.
I don't know about that one either, actually. But, no doubt that we'll come up with ways creatively to create.
Well, and on that subject, I mean, the idea, so plant-based is one, but Josh, both of you, I'm sure, can speak to this, but the way that restaurants need to pay attention to people's food, loosely say allergies, but it's more really food tastes, because I would say 10% of the people who say that they have an allergy issue really are telling the truth. It's probably a lot fewer, but it doesn't really matter if they say, you know, I don't want to eat this or I don't want to eat that. So, I mean, the easy ones are sort of, you know, gluten-free or vegetarian, and or, you know, people are looking at dairy issues, and, you know, there's a million things. But I think that restaurants, a big trend will be restaurants find new and creative ways to deal with those kind of requests, because, I mean, I don't think a day goes by, not a service goes by, or we don't have several plates that have to be completely custom prepared, and that's just the way it's going.
Yeah.
Sure, you know, dietary concerns and people's dietary needs are big, and you know, our chef schooled herself in it, and so that she can guide her staff to be able to better accommodate people's palates.
Yeah.
I'd say the last thing, and I know we're running out of time, but not as far as a trend, but trying to stay as authentic as we can to Maine, and using those ingredients as much as we can, and not trying to dilute it so much. And that's why people are coming here, you know, and as much as we can to keep Maine special. That's
a good way to close that part of the discussion. It's well said, because, you know, authenticity is what drives people really overall to come to Maine, because it's real everything, and real people too, that are, we got to keep providing the good service, the hospitality that Maine's been providing since the 1840s, you know, going back at a time. So we got to make sure we don't lose that competitive advantage. So, so anyhow, that was good. I want to thank these guys for sharing those thoughts. It was wonderful, very good insight. Now, what have we not talked about that you guys have for questions that you'd like to pose to the panel? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for whetting our appetites collectively and individually. I'm Rusty Atwood. I'm a trustee of the Maine Historical Society, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that currently, until next February, there's a show called Maine Eats. The Food Revolution Starts Here, which really touches upon the history of food and its impact on the state of Maine. And beyond Maine, I get updates from all over the place, as we all do on our phones, from The Guardian in the UK, the best towns and small cities in the United States, Portland, Maine. Great article listed along with Eugene, Oregon, and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that.
Pretty good.
Yeah. That means we're number 3.
Was David's picture in that article?
Yeah, Jack.
Jacqueline, quick question, probably for you, David, because you mentioned in 1992 when you came here, it was a great place to start a restaurant. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the conditions now and whether or not an entrepreneur out there has this, what kind of access? And presupposing I know the answer to that question, how do you think that that's playing out in Westbrook and South Portland and Brunswick and other places?
Well, that's a great question. The dynamic has certainly evolved significantly since 1992. So when I came up here in 1992, a small guy like me getting a restaurant, the best possible opportunity was somebody who had owned a building where a restaurant went in, and somebody failed running the restaurant, and they've got a restaurant full of equipment, and they're like, please come in and operate this restaurant and pay us some rent. And I could have had my pick. Those kind of opportunities are not prevalent in Portland, but I bet you that they're prevalent in Biddeford. I bet you they're prevalent in Lewiston. I bet you they're prevalent in Westbrook. So the dynamic has changed somewhat. Portland certainly got more expensive. It's the other big, and Josh, you probably can speak to this. It used to be that, you know, a couple of brothers or a husband and wife could get their toolkit together and go hammer together a bar top out of plywood and, you know, put a little paint and paper and open a restaurant with used chairs and tables, and people were perfectly happy if the hospitality was good and the food was good. I think in Portland we've gotten to the place now where the place has got to be beautiful, it's got to be current, you got to have, you know, a nice looking place setting, and you know, the bathrooms better be pristine, and not only pristine, but they better be, you know, designer, and you know, so the dynamic has certainly changed in those years. But I think that those the opportunity that I had when I came to Portland in 1992 is available in other parts of Maine, in the smaller towns, and that'll continue to drive the dining explosion, the food explosion. It'll just get wider. It'll expand. And my guess it'll go to every little town across. You know.
Yep. Yes.
Hi, Durham guy to the group. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your experience. I'd asked Kathleen a question earlier. What was it and when did the worm turn that Portland became a culinary mecca? What was the secret sauce?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's always been there, and there's some great, Sam doing 4th Street, and there, I remember coming there when I was a student, and there's always been great restaurants, and of course Steve's restaurant. I mean, I remember I bought my first jacket to go to his restaurant. You know what I mean? It was always that, and being from growing up in Casco, Portland was my big city growing up, and to come there and knowing that the city is there and that the restaurants that were in Portland were totally different. And then as it evolved and the farming scene, and Portland it's special, but it's not alone in other states having these smaller cities that have grown up to be these incredible food cities, and like Charleston and Providence, and they're really turning it on now. I think Portland just had a good head start because we have incredible ocean seafood right here. Farmers are right there, and wild game up in the mountains. We have such a diverse chef-centric kind of exposure right here. I mean, I lived in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina for 4 years, and I hated it because it was hot or hotter. There was no season, and as a chef, I need the seasons. You need to know when asparagus is there and when peas are coming. So Portland just has everything. It's like the perfect symbiotic relationship between chefs and the food.
I would just add one quick thing to that too, because the thing about Portland, and particularly Old Port in the downtown, was always about owner-operated businesses. It was not having national brands drop in. In fact, we resisted that in this town, So what you see here are, independent operators, and that's in the retail area and the hotels even. So I think that we had that head start in Portland. We were always about that.
And that's what I was going to say. That, Dirk, that's the difference now. I mean, when I was a kid, it was the big three was Valley's, Village, and DiMillo's, and then there was Sportsman's and Giobbe's and all the other places, Cabra's. But it was the chef-operated restaurants that started opening up is what's driven this food frenzy.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. for the last 3 days. I got back at noon today. But last night, I got taken out to dinner. Where do we go? Ruth Chris, which is right around the corner from the hotel, where the steaks were $59 and the meal was like $600. And, so to the point, we don't charge that here, and we don't have a Ruth Chris. That's not what Portland is. So I think that theme has to remain the same going forward.
And it was a la carte.
Yeah, it was.
You didn't get anything.
The potatoes are separate.
Got the butter on the top. That was it.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. Yeah. More questions?
Look at that. We're out of time. Look at that.
We're getting.
We're at 0.
We're
So
pretty much
zero.
at 0. I guess we're pretty close. Oh,
Time for one more.
bam.
Hi.
Speaking of food,
I was going
Right?
to say, here's someone who would know.
I want to thank everybody on the panel, because if it weren't such an amazing restaurant scene, my business wouldn't be in its 9th year and striving. So I own Maine Foodie Tours, and just to share a little history, when we started, we were the 5th in the country trying to offer a walking tour that visited restaurants and artisanal providers. And now there are over 320 in North America alone, and people are traveling to places to take a culinary tour. It's really come full circle. And what we like to brag about, which is truly unique to our city, is, as you were mentioning, 90% of the restaurants are owned locally, which is huge compared to every other city in the country. And very oftentimes that actually is the chef, which is truly, truly unique. Yeah. Of course, the beer scene is now number 2 per capita for brewing. Breweries based on number of residents here. So we tell people, there are only 1.3 million people, but we all really like to drink beer. So we do really well with that one too. But we are actually the foodiest small town in America too, because of our restaurants per capita. And as we like to explain, it's not really competition, it's co-opetition. Some big Harvard Business School word I learned one day. And really there's so much of that that's really evident with all of the restaurant owners and chefs. It's just, it continues to amaze me. It's just such a privilege to live here, work here. I moved up from Boston, and now I realize how terrible it is in Boston. And I thought I would miss the city, but now my Bostonian friends are all coming to Portland. So thank you, guys.
Great, good call.
And you know, we should mention, I'm thinking my daughter would say distilleries. We've got distilleries now. We didn't have distilleries 10 years ago. Now that's another attraction.
Another piece to it.
And they're all distiller operated, and the breweries are all brewer operated, and most of the restaurants are chef operated.
Well, there you go. I mean, maybe we've just
huge.
covered the secret sauce right there.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you guys very much. It was awesome. And thank you all for being here.
I want to thank our panelists again and Steve for moderating that always fantastic discussion. As always, you can stay up to date by connecting via Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, and stay tuned to the Chamber's website. There will be a video of today's Eggs and Issues on there. And don't forget next month's with the Jobs for Maine's graduates. Have a fantastic afternoon, everybody.